Jim, I am so excited for you to be on the Open Door Sisterhood podcast.
Well, I'm excited too, Krista. And as I was saying, I'm expecting you one day to come and invite me to dinner. I hear you like to cook. So the whole family, the whole Burns family is going to show up in Idaho.
So awesome. Okay. And where are you in the world?
I am in Southern California.
That's what I thought. I thought you
one of
were
those
West
beach
Coast.
guys. So we live right by the beach, and we said, Lord, we're willing to go anywhere and do anything, and as long as it's within a mile of the beach, and that was it.
Yep, absolutely. So did you raise your family there?
Yeah, actually we did. I was raised in Orange County, and Kathy and I then met in college. We got married, went away to grad school in Princeton, New Jersey, and really we were going to go anywhere. We ended up coming back to Orange County, and we've never moved. So I have 3 daughters, so of course we have no hormones or drama in our life. Yeah. And our 3 daughters were raised in the same house.
Oh, you're kidding.
So we have lived in the same house for 35 years.
Wow.
And so we live in Dana Point, California. We love Dana Point. And it's fun. I see my old high school friends.
You do?
Yeah. So because it's the same county. Now, I had an embarrassing moment not too long ago where I was doing a video and they had makeup all over me because you got to put makeup on the top of a bald guy's head. And we're talking not just little, they were really had made it. And I forgot I had it on, and I went to a restaurant, and Jerry Dahl, who I had a crush on in 5th grade, okay, she shows up at the restaurant and she says, "You're Jim, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Oh, it's so good to see you." And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, I had a crush on her when she was little. And I knew her through high school and whatnot. She was the homecoming queen, of course. So then I go back to the seat where these other men were, and they said, "Hey, you got a bunch of makeup on your face." And I thought, oh gosh, she's going to go tell all of our high school friends that Jim, wears weird makeup at times. So.
Oh my gosh, that's
it's part
classic.
of the problem of living in the same county.
Totally. Well, that's awesome. My brother lives in Santa Barbara, so we're down there periodically.
Oh, that's a place to suffer.
Yeah, really sad. Really sad he has to live in Santa Barbara. Well, so Jim, you mentioned you have 3 daughters, and we are diving into a conversation today that I am so excited about because it definitely is where we are and where we're headed. My oldest is a sophomore in college, so we're starting this trend. We've been in this transition for a while, but we're talking about parenting adult children.
Yes.
And I thought to start our interview, I would read a few statements that I found about what millennials, or those really old Generation Zs, are saying about us as parents.
That's
okay.
great.
So I thought we'd start with that. Okay. I grew up with helicopter parents, and now I can't function like a real adult. Okay. How about that? Okay, these are all the things that I think are going to land my kids in therapy too. I feel like a failure by my parents' standards. My parents have become now helicopter grandparents. I like that. I'm like, okay. My parents are overly involved in my financial life. My parents didn't teach me how to navigate negative emotions. So I thought this was really interesting because when we're talking about how to parent adult children, we're really having to look at who are culturally our adult children. And that is the millennials, or the older end of the Generation Z. So tell us, who are these people that are saying these things about us?
Well, that's a great question, because I think we have to start by saying we have to be students of their culture, and they are different. Because, at one time we were off to sophomore year of college, and we were 16, 17, 18, 20, 24, and on up. But we were never their age because they experienced so much, so young and so different. So their approach is different, but also our parenting approach was different. So as our kids become adults, we've got to basically reinvent how we do parenting. And it's a parallel journey because they have to learn it and we have to learn it. We have to learn it differently. Mm-hmm. So this new millennial, they are people who are totally looking at the social media and online world differently than we do. Sometimes their morals and values are different. The one comment was that they talked about finances, and 75% of parents are still funding their adult children in one way or another. So, that's
so the helicopter thing crosses.
Exactly. And what we found is that the helicopter parenting thing caused a generation to have a failure to launch. And so they are having a hard time launching because we were enabling them instead of equipping them to become responsible adults. So just last week, I was in Montgomery, Alabama, doing a parenting seminar for parents with younger kids. And I said, the bottom line is to raise responsible adults, not to just raise obedient kids. Well, if you're going to raise responsible adults, it means you've got to give them some of the freedom to make mistakes. And I don't think this generation of kids has probably made enough mistakes, because we came in and did their homework for them and continued to make their bed until they were 18 and on and on. When in fact, they now are even looking back and saying, wow, they can't blame it all on parenting, but the helicopter parent didn't work. Now they call them lawnmower parents. We're just kind of mowing them right through.
Right. Well, so it is interesting, because the very things that I think they liked that we did for them, they now resent, right? Like when it said, I grew up with helicopter parents and now I can't function like a real adult, and it's your fault. Like it's your fault that I can't.
It's still our fault.
Right? Because we're just doing the best we can. But so talk to us a little bit about, that was a good snapshot. And now we kind of move into individual families.
Yeah.
And talk to us about, what does that look like to be equipping kids before we're actually in this stage?
Right. Well, actually, it does go back to what I was saying, Krista. I think we really do have to realize that there's different stages of parenting. So when you have little kids, well, right now we have Charlotte, who's 1 year old. This is our granddaughter, and we are like, just crazy about this kid. But Christy and Steve are not really even, they're parenting, but they're not disciplining them. They're just caring. Then you kind of move to controlling, because if they have a 3-year-old, our grandson James is 3. So they're controlling James. They're going to tell him what to wear, and they're going to tell him when it's time to eat. And they're obviously not going to let him go down to the mall. But when you get to be when kids get to be about 10, 11, now you're coaching them. And coaching means that, you're still in charge, you're taking the lead. A lot of times parents don't lead. Then you have to move to consulting, which is kind of after 15. Most of the day-to-day decisions should be made by them, although that's hard when kids are, making some poor choices. And then, when they're adults, you're now in a caring stage. The problem is we parents, it's kind of a weaning process, and we don't do so good on the weaning, and they don't do so good on the weaning either.
Right.
So the point being is that, it's important for us to understand what stage we're in. And I know it's so hard for Kathy and I, because if our kids were making poor choices, or they were sibling rivalry or whatever it was, we wanted to go back into the control stage. And in reality, if we did that, then we were going to do the helicopter parenting thing, and they weren't going to, launch as adults. And so they had to figure it out. Today, our 3 girls really, really like each other. We wondered if that was going to be the case.
All parents wonder at some point.
Oh my gosh.
Are they ever going to be friends?
Yeah, but I think it takes real discipline on the parents' part to say we're gonna change it, especially when, if you think about where you're almost at with your oldest, you spend and invest 2 decades of your life dreaming about them, and now you're sort of not as needed once you get, after those 2 decades or whatever. And that's a hard one for all of us. But the truth is you can, like right now, in my relationship, I was thinking about my daughter Heidi, who's my youngest, and I had a great conversation with her this morning. And she lives in New York City, and they're moving back to Los Angeles. She's recently married. And I'm kind of a mentor to her now. And I don't think I could have ever been that mentor if I wouldn't have kind of released her. And in releasing Heidi, it was kind of hard because she didn't make great choices in college. And we were like, what on earth are you doing? But, when the Bible talks about you train up a child in the way that they would go, in the end, they'll return. It doesn't say they're not going to have a few bumps. Mm-hmm. So Kathy and I had to learn to bite our tongue. I have this book called Doing Life with Your Adult Child, Keep Your Mouth Shut and the Welcome Mat Out. And we just had to learn that there were times with Heidi that we had to keep our mouth shut, and we still do. But with that, I think I earned the right to become mentor to her by partly keeping my mouth shut.
Was she communicating with you during that time? How did you know she wasn't making the best choices?
Well, since she was our kid, and she's a great person, but we just sort of assumed. And when like in college, I would call her up and I'd go, how you doing? Great thing about, cell phones is you're in touch with your kids so much more. I called my parents on Sunday afternoon if I remembered to do it,
Right.
And from a payphone. But, she was always either going to a Bible study or studying. And I realized about 6 months into that, I don't think she's probably always going to a Bible study, and I rather doubt if she's studying as much as she is. Well,
Uh-huh.
it started kind of coming out, and frankly, it was a matter of us trying to pull things out of her, but we also had to realize that she was going to have to figure this out on her own. And that was hard for both Kathy and me, because we wanted to know, we wanted to be involved, very close to Heidi, continue to be close to Heidi. But she pulled away. Partly she pulled away because she was violating some of the values of our family. She doesn't mind me talking about this with you too, but she was kind of violating some of those values. And our story isn't half as bad as what I hear most every day. But with that, I don't think she was really willing to spend it. She wasn't going to come to us talking about that. One time she said, I had to disown my parents' faith to own my own faith. And so there was this time when we wondered, but we really didn't get all the info. And when she was at our house, she, she was at church with us, and she was kind of the Heidi that we knew and loved, but we knew that she was going through what we'd call the experimental phase. So I wish I could say she sat down with us because we are the awesome parents of the century, and she just wanted our insight and our input. And what about this relationship with this boy? And what do you think about this and that? She didn't do it. And that was hurtful to us. And we've also had to realize, Krista, that for us as our kids have gotten older, because we have kids now Heidi's 30 years old, but we had to realize that we're an important part of their life, but they've moved on also. And we have to give them the freedom to make some of those choices by the grace of God. Some of the choices we hoped they would make at 20, they're now making 30, 32, and for us 34 with our kids.
Right. So it may not be on our timeline, and that's important to acknowledge.
No, think about that. We have a timeline for our kids, and it's almost always different than what their timeline is. Or, our pastor always says, God is never too late, or he's never too early. And I think sometimes he's been late along the way, not trying to tell him what to do. But, I was hoping some things would come about earlier.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I was thinking as you were talking that this stage actually comes sooner than I think we're ready for. Yeah. So, I heard you say you really make that transition after 16. Is that what you said? Yeah.
Well, I would say 16 they now have more freedom. They have a driver's license for most of them. They are going out on dates quite possibly. There's more freedom to kind of be away. In America, adult is 18. And with all of our kids, they'd go, well, I'm an adult now. I'm 18. And we'd kind of go, well, who's paying for your cell phone? We're paying for college. I paid that insurance bill, things like that. So it's a messy stage. After 16, it's always messy. Families are messy. That's the beauty and the craziness of it, and the joy of it too. But once they're out, away at college, more on the adult side, that's when it gets kind of confusing, because you still have major ties to them. Sometimes it's finances. It's definitely what your dreams and hopes are for them. And so part of that is that dance you do. Like with my kids now, because they're 30 and a little bit older, that dance is kind of done. In terms of the dance for us was the 20-somethings. My background is student ministry. And I remember when I was getting my PhD, I was studying when the brain quits growing, and it was age 16. That's what I learned at Greenwich University. Well, now nobody believes that. We all know it's age 24 or so, and it's the frontal cortex or the decision making that's kind of the last thing to come together. And I can't always blame it on the brain, but I think there's some decisions made by millennials or Gen Z kids. They're making some of those decisions that we might not make, because honestly, you could kind of blame it on the brain. Now, tell that to a parent who has kids who are violating values or whatever, and it's not an easy answer. But we still have to, they are still going through it. So we're doing the dance, and both of us have to learn how to do it. Mm-hmm. It's not just it's not just parents. It's the students too.
So, what strategies did you start utilizing? I think maybe some handholds would be helpful for parents who are starting to move or are on the heels of that stage. And do you have some practical strategies that parents can utilize?
Yeah. Well, I actually think we have to have the end in mind, and the end is that we're going to launch them to responsibility. So if it comes to finances, then, what's the exit strategy to help them move from being somewhat dependent on us to having more independent responsibilities? When it comes time to even their faith, what's the exit strategy? Meaning they're not going to be as dependent on us. They're going to have to, utilize those tools. So I think early on, one of the things we realized was that we were going to have to, continue to be available to them, but we're going to have to, you can't see my tongue, but I think there's a scar on my tongue because we had to learn to keep our mouth shut, bite our tongue at things and wait for them to ask questions or input. And that was really hard for us, but that's a strategy I think that works with doing life with your adult child. And I have a funny story. I was a couple of years ago, my daughter, Krista, and Steve, they were getting ready to move and they were staying at our house because they were trying to save some money. And so I said to Krista and Steve, they were almost in an argument in front of us about how they were going to choose to move. Were they going to, rent something, or were they going to, they were trying to figure it out, and they were trying to look for cheap, and they both had a disagreement. So I said, I have an idea. And I go, do you want to hear it? So what I did was, I thought it was what I say, when I'm speaking or in the book, when I'm talking about adult children, I ask for permission. And my daughter, Krista, who is our oldest and definitely our strong-willed child, she goes, not right now, Dad. And I went, wait, people pay me to give them advice. And what was funny is the idea was partly that I thought Kathy and I might be able to help a little bit. And maybe that would relieve some of their pressure. But I just bit my tongue, and my wife later kind of gave me a high five going, that's amazing, because I know where you were going and you just bit your tongue. Later, right. Christy then did say, hey, what were you going to say, Dad? Which I appreciate, but I think one of the rules there is to make that happen. We like to say unsolicited advice is usually taken as criticism, but you've been giving advice for 2 decades. If you've been given advice for 2 decades, how do you just, stop it? So I think we do have to be more careful. The one at the very beginning of the podcast, when you were talking about what the students said about the parents, well, the parents continue to give advice, and it's good advice. Usually we're right.
Right.
They've got to be able to learn on their own. So I think that's, one of the issues. And
we had, I was just going to jump in and say, David Thomas came on in January and talked about parenting, and he was using a phrase, and he said, the 2 things that we can do with older, especially, all ages of kids, but especially for those teenage plus years, is the empathy plus questioning.
Yeah, it's good.
It's so good, really just leaning into empathizing with where they are, and then asking them, what are you going to do? Or what's your strategy for this? Yeah. And I constantly have to check myself, because I automatically go into advice mode, and I have to back up and then ask a question instead. Yeah. It really is a training. I'm finding it. I'm frustrated with myself that I'm doing that.
No, it's really good. I think Dave Thomas said it exactly right. That and to ask questions, we have to do it where it's not sounding judgmental. Well, that sounds interesting. So help me get my arms around it. What are you going to do? Because again, they're going to see even sometimes questions as, more or less passive aggressive behavior. But it's really good, because what you're doing is you're helping them make those kind of decisions on their own. And you know what? If they've been raised in a home where they had some of that earlier on, they're going to end up making good decisions. They're going to bump along the way, but I think it is going to help. But so I'm big on talking about strategies, and I'll move from that question. But I'm big on actually setting boundaries, setting expectations, setting goals together. Say they move back in, they've been out, or all 3 of our kids after college moved back into our home. And, they were different. They had different curfews now, and they had different thoughts about things. And it wasn't all bad, but it was different. And so I had an opinion that I had when they were 16 that I now really couldn't share when they were 22. So what I found was, I think you have to almost create some contracts with them. And I don't know that we talk about contract counseling with kids, but I don't think you put a contract in front of them. But I think you do have some understandings and boundaries, and that really does help. And
do you have them lead in that too? How do you navigate that?
Well, what I say is Yeah, I think you do. I say people help support what they create, what they help create. And so you never do it in the heat of a battle or the moment that's where there's too much, drama going on or whatever. But I think, you find and say, hey, you know what, we all obviously want the best. What we want is, for you to thrive and, for us to thrive and for this to be right. Why don't we create a couple of thoughts? We did this with our daughter, Becca, who had been away for a long time, and she had a roommate. The roommate moved, and she came back and she said, hey, I want to live with you guys for 2 months. Is that okay? And we're like, we're jubilant. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And then she decided that she was going to go back and get her master's degree in clinical psychology and become a therapist. And so we said, that's awesome. But then she renegotiated the contract because she said, without ever using the word contract, but she said, okay, so if I'm getting work and I'm working part-time and I'm doing school, it's financially, it's going to be tough. Can I stay longer? And we said, absolutely. And we said some of the conditions. I said, this isn't the Burns Hotel. So, when you were 17, you did have some of these kind of responsibilities, but we want these kind of responsibilities. And actually, we'd like to have dinner with you once a week. And in her mind, once a week, that's no big deal. She'll get more out of it. But that was something that we held her to. We said, hey, we're looking for a weekly night. When do we get a meal with you? So it was that setting that kind of stuff up. So we actually went against what we sometimes say to say, try to help them, she lived with us for the 2 years that she was in grad school. She called us the roomies. She traveled a little bit with me, and she would never, if you would have said, Krista, we're at something and you said, hey, so Becca, where do you live? She'd go, oh, I live in Dana Point. She would never say she lived 2 bedrooms down and over to the right, but
For sure.
But that was a good thing for us because we felt like it was really healthy with Becca because we actually did the contract without her ever knowing that this was something written down. I mean, when we sat down and had the conversation over a meal, I had notes in my pocket. Never pulled them out because I memorized them. She went to the bathroom and I said, okay, Kathy, is there anything we're missing? And she goes, oh, I think we should add this. And I went, okay, good. And so we kind of had that. And I think that's really healthy for an adult. You're having an adult to adult conversation because you've had an adult child relationship. The adult to adult conversation says, let's look at it. Even if it sometimes, gets a little bit harried if they don't totally agree with what we're hoping for.
It's a really good point because you mentioned that even though it wasn't this formal contractual thing in the moment, you had done the pre-thinking, and it sounds like with Kathy. So
yeah.
That is, I think, important to mention because when we go into these conversations, we need to be equipped and ready and have logically thought through, know what really is important to us. So how did you and Kathy navigate that?
Well, for us, it was, we're both, if you look at certain, psychological tests, we're both feelers. So we're going to do things, neither one of us is as logical as we'd like to be. And a friend of mine who was a pastor said he did this with his kids, that every 6 months, even when they were younger, they would go someplace, Starbucks, or for some reason for us, because we live by the beach, we'd go sit at the beach in beach chairs. And we'd kind of talk about spiritual development, sex education, their school, relationships, and all this. And we kind of say, what do we want in the next 6 months to kind of work through without really ever sitting down and making it formalized. So, we're driving in a car, if something comes up, or, so Kathy and I would try to get on the same page. Well, we continued that when they got to be adults. What are some of these issues that we need to talk about? So I remember for Kathy and I, we actually didn't go to the beach, but we went to Starbucks and we wrote down kind of more or less a contract on how we wanted to communicate with Becca. And then when we met with her, what was cool about it was we were also on the same page. Because I think a lot of us, when we have adult children, we have a hard enough time when our kids are little to be on the same page. Disneyland dad doesn't want to do discipline. Mom has to do all the discipline or vice versa, that stuff. So for us, we were pretty much on the same page on what we expected for Becca. And Becca knew from the beginning that what we wanted for her to do was thrive, and we were believing in her. And, we had to compromise on a few things in terms of some money deals and stuff like that. That was fine, but it was really helpful for Kathy and me to do it ahead of time. If we would have just done it off the cuff, which I have been known to do, if we would have done that, then Kathy might not have been totally with me. But for us having it, we didn't veer much from the map that we had created ahead of time. Becca actually gave some good ideas, and then she, again, I'm acting like it's all formal, but it's just over dinner. She goes, well, what about, blah, blah, blah. And we went, oh, what do you think, Kathy? I think, so it was just a conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so helpful. Okay, I want to dive into a little bit. It's hard for parents, I think, to make that mental jump from I am the parent and I have more wisdom, more experience, more knowledge. And so I'm going to treat you like a child, to even though you don't have those things yet, I'm going to treat you as an adult.
Right.
How does a parent mentally make that jump?
Yeah. I think it's easier to do it mentally than it is to do it in action.
Good
Because you can
point.
say,
Good
wow,
point.
I need to let them make some of these decisions. And then you get in the moment and you're like, wait, that's not a good decision. I have the answer. And we truly do have the answer. And so I think it becomes a discipline. The Bible talks about, Paul said to Timothy, discipline yourself for the purpose of godliness. Well, that was kind of like an athletic training thing. So I think it's going to be, discipline means you're going to make 4 good decisions, and you're going to make 2 bad decisions. You're going to make 5 good decisions and then 3. And you're kind of going to go forward, but same time, you're going to have to, sometimes you'll slip up. So I think it's more when we know in our head what it is, and then we go after that goal. But if we do slip up, and we will, then we sometimes have to just simply need, say, hey, I apologize for that. I really want to treat you like an adult. And,
That's good. That's good. Just saying it. You know what?
Yeah.
I didn't treat you in the way I wanted to right now, and let's try that again.
Yeah. We personally, this is a very personal conversation as I think about where my kids are. But personally, I think there were times when I had to say to my kids, here's what we're trying to accomplish here. Okay. So we're going to mess up. I know you're going to mess up because, we're both, sinners saved by grace. So here's what I'm going for. If I slip up, I'm going to try to remember to tell you I'm sorry. But we're going to walk on each other's toes a little bit. I found that when my kids understood that we were trying the best we could, and they would slip into it too. They would slip into, I know I'm 23, but I'm going to start acting like I'm 16. And I want
My
you
kids
guys.
call that reverting all the time. My daughter's like, I'm reverting. I'm reverting.
I love that about your daughter. I love this girl because if she says she's reverting, then she already's halfway toward wholeness and
She's
adulthood.
getting there. Yeah.
I love that.
Okay. So there is a topic that I really want to cover, and that is relationships. One of the hardest things that I have found as a parent in this stage is, besides their commitment or besides their decision to follow Christ, who they marry
Sure.
is the most important decision, because it will take them on a path of either, right, life-giving marriage can just be the most beautiful thing in the world, and yet a bad marriage can be the most destructive thing in the world. And I think it hits on all the fear chords in me.
Yes.
And how do we navigate that well? And what if our child is with someone that we really don't think is best for them?
Right. And I actually hear that as much as, and pain I can see it in people's eyes when they start talking about it. My daughter or my son is, doing this. I wish there was an easy answer. And, flippantly, I used to say to Kathy, maybe during this season, we should move to India, because I hear in India that you could choose spouses for. I'd like to have done that.
Totally. I talk about that all the time.
Yeah. But part of it is, that's a tough one, because again, I think we have to release them and pray that we help them make good decisions. I often say by about 18, they should at least know how to have a relationship with the master, to have a healthy relationship with a healthy mate, and also that they would have learned how to find their purpose or their mission in life, kind of the 3 M's. And Kathy and I sometimes had to, hold on tight, because we didn't see them our kids always making the wisest decisions. We found that if we were still involved in their life big time, and if we actually got to know some of these people, I remember we got to know this one guy, and I was hoping and praying that this was not going to be the marriage guy. But we got to know him so well that, our daughter started talking to us much more about it, because we saw good things and bad things in the relationship. And we said, well, we don't want to tell you what to do, but here's some things that we saw. She invited us to have that conversation. I think if we would have just come in with a conversation, slam, bang, this is not good, I think it would have hurt the relationship. And one of our daughters I could have seen going in that direction. But so I think we have to honor their their decision-making process, even if it's what we think is not a good decision. I have said, and I have two son-in-laws, and I love these guys. I mean, I love that I now have some boys in my family, and I've said to both of them, I think I like you guys sometimes more than I like the girls.
Right.
But you know what? I wouldn't have chosen either one of them. And I just wouldn't have. They wouldn't.
That's good to hear.
They didn't make it to what we thought was what and who our girls should go for. Today, I'm grateful that our girls had enough wisdom and insight on that. But what we had to do is play that story more with, we needed to honor their relationship with these people. We didn't have the deep stuff. I was talking with somebody today who just brokenness because their daughter is going to go move in with the boyfriend in San Diego. They live in my area, and they're going to drive, they're going to move down. And these are wonderful. They did a great job as parents. I know them way too well. I know what a great job. And they were just they're so hurt. And we started the process. We didn't finish it, but we started the process of what happens if that, what do you do? So I think you love her like crazy, because when she crashes, you want her to come home. Right. And if you've disowned her, or if you've said such horrible things about this situation, Charity, I go, does she know how you feel? Absolutely. So I think we have every right to let our kids know how we feel and what we think. But if we become a one-topic parent with adult children on something like that, I don't think it's going to work. Now, some of your podcast folks may disagree with me on this, but I find that if we hang in there, at the same time, I would have boundaries. I was telling him this, he goes, what do we do when they come home and we know that they're sleeping together? I said, well, at your house, you have every right. We had a relative who was living with a girlfriend. And when they came to our house, we said, hey, here's the deal. We're not trying to be your moral cops. However, at our house, here's the rule. And they were great with it. And I even heard myself say, and if that doesn't work, and if we have to get you guys in a motel or something, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this was not one of those conversations that Kathy and I talked about. And he said, oh, no, we don't need to do that. We're good with that. Today, they're really strong Christians, and they just laugh. They go, that must've been really hard for you guys. Aww. And I said, you know what? Because now they have kids, and whatnot. But that was hard. But I think you do that with your own children. I think you say, look, here's our boundary in our house. This is how we do it in the house. And here's why. But I'd say that question, you're asking great questions, Krista, because that question is one of the most often asked questions I get when we're dealing with this particular subject.
For sure. Oh yeah. Well, it's so important. And I didn't know when I got married at 24 that was such an important decision, because you just don't know where it's going to take you. No, exactly. And frankly, when we were teasing about the India thing, but arranged marriages, I'm not suggesting that we change that, please hear that. But arranged marriages kind of work because parents do get culture. They're going to marry somebody with, they're going to want you to marry somebody with the same faith values and, all these different things. We're just sometimes in love or in infatuation or, whatever it might be. That's a tough one. And especially if our kids aren't making the decisions that we know that they could make, if they've just strayed for a season or something. That's hard. That's where, miracles happen every day, and we have to believe in the miracle that, God's not finished with them yet. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So we only have a few minutes left, and I want to say, or want to ask, what charge would you give parents who are in this stage? What are kind of your top 3 most bedrock principles for parenting this stage of kids? Yeah. Well, in some ways we've covered them. Unsolicited advice is taken as criticism. To me, we just have to bite our tongue. That doesn't mean that we're not involved in their life, but now we have to almost, receive their permission to speak into their life on certain things. I also think that we have to look at ourselves and say, I am not going to enable my kids so that they won't become responsible adults. So that goes back to, am I parenting them to become responsible adults, even when they're adults? And so the enabling part, I think is a key and critical process. And, have you heard that? I just want to interject. Yeah. Have you heard the difference between helping and enabling? So tell me. So enabling is doing something for someone they can do for themselves. Yeah. and helping is doing something for someone they can't do for
Yeah,
themselves.
I love that.
That's been helpful for me.
Yeah, I actually have that in my book. I love that phrase. The other one, and this we didn't talk about, but I just say have serious fun. When I look at traits of a healthy family, it's the families who have fun together, families who have some kind of a fun cooking meal, where you cook together and you have fun and you laugh and whatever. And you can't be that one topic parent. So continue to have fun, because play draws you together. Fun, laughter draws you together. Building traditions, draws you together. Now, the only other thing I would add, you said 3, but I'm going to go with 4, is get as physically, spiritually, and emotionally as healthy as you can be, because it's not going to be an easy road all the time. Even in the easiest of ones, it's still sometimes where, you want to work on yourself. And a lot of parents have put all of their emotional energy into their kids for these 2 decades. Now it's time for them not to be selfish, but for them to make sure that they're taking care of their own soul. I had a woman say to me once, untended fires soon become nothing but a pile of ashes. That was prophetic for me, because I'm going to be the one who's going to give everything I've got to my kids, give everything I have to the work that I think God has called me to do. And then I don't have anything left for myself. And in doing that, it's not a selfish thing to do self-care and to do self-leadership in your own life. And I think parents of adult children, this is their season to do that.
I know. We just celebrated my parents' 54th anniversary last night, and we went out to dinner, and I wrote in their card, I said, your love for each other has been a gift to each other, but your love for each other and the way you have cultivated your second season, right after we left the home, that has actually been the biggest gift you could ever give to us, because it creates this incredible, unshakable foundation that we all get to stand on. So it blesses them, but it also trickles down, and we all stand on that. And so it's just whether we get healthy with ourselves, which, right, when we come healthy, then we come to the relationship whole, then our marriage is better. And then we invest in that. And then that, all those ripple effects, they matter so much.
You summarized our conversation beautifully with that. I mean, it's and how God bless your parents, for being that role model. And you know what, through most of it, they probably weren't thinking they were doing what we've been talking about. They were just, trying to make it through Thursday when the kids were younger. And now here they are, 54 years of marriage and an inspiration to you. And now to me, I got goosebumps hearing that. I love that.
Well, because they didn't just survive their marriage, they enjoyed their second season of marriage. Awesome. And it got better over time. And that's what I want, right? I want my marriage to be better every season. Yeah. And then, we get to have more, when we're good, we get to have more fun with our bigger family because we're happy with the 2 of us. You're content.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Really good stuff.
Okay. Well, we could talk a long time.
Great to talk with you. Great to do this. And it looks like what you're doing on the podcast and all the other stuff just looks great.
Thank you so much, Jim. Well, I really appreciate that you're speaking into this season of parenting, because not a lot of people are.
No, I know.
I think we're all trying to find our way. And so thank you. Can you tell us where people can find your book and your resources?
Well, the book is called Doing Life with Your Adult Child. Keep your mouth shut, the welcome mat out. It's just out. When I say just out, it's just out. And they can go to homeword.com, HOMEWORD.com, and get all kinds of great free stuff. And we have podcasts and we have articles and tips and all that kind of fun stuff. But the book's there. The book's also available anywhere books are sold. And we're excited about this kind of new adventure for us. We've focused on mainly younger kids. And now we're looking at these families that are going, wait, what about for the older kids?
Right. Because you never stop being a parent.
Exactly.
Yes. All right, Jim. We'll have a wonderful day. Thank you again.
Thanks, Krista.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.